Roger Federer gave Alex Eala a luxury watch, and the internet has not been the same since. What began as a quiet, private gesture backstage at the ATP Finals quickly transformed into one of the most debated moments in recent tennis history. But strip away the controversy, the viral videos, and the heated forum arguments, and what you find at the center of this story is something far more meaningful than a timepiece. This is a story about respect, about recognition, about what happens when a legend looks across a crowded room and sees something in a young player that the rest of the world has not yet fully appreciated. When icons acknowledge rising stars, everything changes. And what unfolded after that night in Turin? Nobody saw it coming. Turin, Italy. November 2024. The ATP Finals were in full swing, and the tennis world had converged on northern Italy to watch the year's finest male players compete for the season's ultimate prize. But tucked inside the sponsor lounges and media corridors, quietly and without fanfare, something else entirely was taking shape. Alex Eala was not supposed to be there. She had just completed a punishing WTA 125 tournament in Spain, grinding through injuries and physical exhaustion to protect her ranking. Her season had been one long test of endurance, qualifying rounds, early exits at majors, and the relentless grinding pressure that breaks most players her age before they ever come close to breaking through. At 22, she was still searching for her moment, still fighting to prove she belonged among the elite. Her management team had secured an invitation to a private Nike event running alongside the ATP Finals, a networking opportunity, a chance to meet sponsors and shake hands with people who mattered in the sport. She almost did not go. She was tired in the deep, bone-level way that accumulates over a long, difficult season. But something told her to show up anyway. The event was held in a private suite overlooking the main court. Players, coaches, and executives mingled under warm, low lighting. Eala stayed near the edges of the room, instinctively uncomfortable in spaces like this. Women's tennis rarely shared the same stage as the men's circuit, not in terms of media attention, not in prize money, and certainly not in the kind of institutional respect that filled rooms like this one. She knew it. Everyone in the sport knew it. And then across the room she saw him. Roger Federer. Retired for 2 years, but still the most magnetic presence in any room he walked into. He was deep in conversation with sponsors, relaxed and laughing, a living embodiment of everything the sport could be at its most graceful. Eala had watched him win Wimbledon as a child. She had studied his movement, his composure, his extraordinary ability to perform at his best when the pressure was at its most suffocating. And now, 10 meters away, there he was. She did not approach him. She would not dare. But fate, it turned out, had other plans. Federer's eyes swept the room and stopped. For a brief moment, they landed directly on her. He paused mid-sentence. Then, without hesitation, he excused himself from his conversation and walked straight toward her. She froze. He extended his hand, offered that warm, familiar smile, and said something she would never forget. "I've been following your journey. You fight like a champion." Her mind was racing. Roger Federer knew who she was. Had watched her matches. It did not feel real, but it was. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it felt much longer. Federer asked about her season, her goals, her mindset, with a kind of genuine, unhurried curiosity that made her feel truly seen. Not as a ranking or a statistic, but as a person, as a fighter. And then he reached into his jacket pocket. Those who witnessed what happened next would describe it in vivid detail for weeks afterward. Some thought he was reaching for his phone. Others assumed a business card. But when his hand emerged, it held a small, elegant box. Deep blue, unmistakable to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Rolex box. Eala's eyes went wide. Federer opened it slowly, revealing a Rolex Daytona. Rose gold white dial, one of the most iconic luxury timepieces in the world. The kind of watch that costs more than most players outside the top 50 earn in an entire year of competing. "I want you to have this," Federer said, his voice calm and certain. "Not because of what you've achieved yet, because of how you fight for it." The room had gone quiet. Other guests had noticed. Phones were out, discreetly filming. Eala stood speechless, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the box. She tried to refuse, told him it was too much, that she could not accept it. Federer shook his head gently. "You remind me of myself at your age. Hungry, relentless, but also doubting whether the world would ever truly recognize it. Wear this, and remember that you belong here." Her eyes filled with tears. She managed a quiet thank you, though the words felt completely inadequate for the moment. Federer smiled, placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, and walked away. She opened the box again. The watch gleamed under the soft sweet lighting. And then she noticed something on the back of the case, something she had not seen the first time. An engraving. She tilted it toward the light and read, "To those who fight beyond the baseline." Her breath caught. This was not a spontaneous gesture. This was intentional, deliberate, deeply personal. A message from one fighter to another across the divide of generation and circumstance. She had no idea what was about to happen next. Within 30 minutes, photos had leaked online. A blurry video captured Federer handing her the box. Another showed her reaction, tears visible, the watch gleaming in her hands. The images spread instantly across every platform. And the internet, as it tends to do, exploded. The first wave was pure, uncomplicated admiration. Fans called it one of the classiest moments in recent tennis history. Federer's name trended globally within hours. Eala's follower count surged. Videos of the exchange accumulated millions of views before the night was over. And then the tone shifted. Tennis forums filled with questions that grew sharper and more pointed with each passing hour. Why Eala? Why not Coco Gauff, who had just won the US Open? Why not Iga Swiatek, the dominant force in women's tennis for the past several years? Why not Emma Raducanu, whose Cinderella story at the 2021 US Open had captivated the entire world? Some accused Federer of playing favorites. Others suggested the whole thing had been orchestrated by Nike. Both players shared the sponsorship, as a calculated social media moment. One viral tweet crystallized the criticism with brutal efficiency. Federer gave a Rolex to a player ranked outside the top 100 while actual champions get ignored. Make it make sense. Another read, "This is exactly what's wrong with tennis. The stars get the spotlight. Everyone else grinds in silence." Even some players, anonymously through tennis tabloids, weighed in. The debate spilled off social media and onto ESPN panels and tennis podcasts. Was this a beautiful act of mentorship? Or an uncomfortable reminder that success in professional tennis is shaped as much by connections as by talent? Eala stayed silent for 48 hours. Her team advised patience, expecting the noise to fade. Did not. Then she posted a single Instagram story. No long caption. Just a photo of the watch on her wrist and a quote overlaid on the image. "This isn't about the gift. It's about being seen." It went viral immediately. Some fans rallied behind her fiercely, sharing her career statistics, her years of grinding through financial limitations and physical setbacks, arguing that she represented exactly the kind of player the tennis system consistently overlooked. Others read the post as tone-deaf, a rising player drawing attention to luxury while hundreds of others were struggling to afford flights to the next tournament. The debate raged. And buried at the center of it all was a single question nobody could quite answer. What did the watch really mean? The answer was hiding in a conversation that almost nobody knew had taken place. A moment 3 months earlier at Wimbledon, that explained everything. Eala had fought through 3 rounds of qualifying just to earn a spot in the main draw. She lost in the first round, a brutal 3-set battle against a top 30 player that lasted over 2.5 hours. She gave everything she had. Still was not enough. After the match, she sat alone in the locker room, head in her hands. The disappointment was total. She had worked so hard and sacrificed so much for so long, and here she was again, another early exit, another reminder that she was still just outside the door of where she needed to be. That is when Roger Federer walked past. He was at Wimbledon as a guest, absorbing the atmosphere of the tournament he had won 8 times. He noticed her through the open door. The slumped shoulders. The quiet devastation. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "Tough match out there," he said. She looked up, startled. Wiped her eyes quickly. "I watched the last set," Federer continued. "You didn't give up. Not once. That's rare." She did not know what to say. She nodded. Federer stepped inside and sat down on the bench across from her. "I lost in the first round of Wimbledon once," he said. 2002. I was the defending champion and I got destroyed. I thought my career was over." She stared at him. She had never heard that story. "But I learned something that day. The fight isn't always about winning. It's about showing up when everything in you wants to quit. That's what separates the good from the great." They talked for 20 minutes, about pressure, about doubt, about the particular loneliness of life on the professional tour. Federer shared stories from his early career that he rarely discussed publicly. The moments he questioned his ability. Times he came close to walking away. Before he left, he looked her directly in the eye. "Don't let this sport break you. You have something special. Can see it." Eala never forgot that conversation. It carried her through the rest of the season, through the injuries, the losses, the quiet nights in anonymous hotel rooms when she questioned whether any of it was worth it. And months later, in Turin, Federer had remembered. He had followed her journey, watched her fight, and decided the moment had arrived to make sure she knew she had been seen. The engraving on the watch was not random. To those who fight beyond the baseline. It was the continuation of a conversation that had started in a Wimbledon locker room, a message from one fighter to another, across the divide of generation and circumstance. But the world did not know this story. Not yet. And when Eala finally shared it, the entire conversation shifted. 2 days after her Instagram post, she sat down for an interview with a tennis podcast. She had not planned to speak publicly, but the noise had grown too large to simply wait out. She needed to tell the full story. She described the Wimbledon locker room conversation, Federer's kindness in a moment when she had nothing left, the meaning behind the engraving. "This wasn't about favoritism," she said, her voice steady but carrying clear emotion. "It was about someone believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's all it ever was." The clip went viral. Millions watched. The reactions, as they had been throughout, were divided. Some fans deeply moved, flooding her comments with their own stories of struggling in silence and being overlooked. Others doubled down. A former WTA player posted publicly, "I respect Roger, but there are hundreds of players grinding just as hard. Why does one person get the spotlight?" A prominent tennis journalist published an op-ed titled "The Rolex Controversy Exposes Tennis's Privilege Problem." The debate had evolved into something larger than the original story. A genuine reckoning with the financial disparities of professional tennis, the lack of institutional support for players outside the top 50, and the way recognition in sport so often flows to those who already have access and connections. Eala found herself at the center of a conversation she had never asked to join. Then Federer broke his silence. A short statement posted without fanfare on his social media. "I've given advice, support, and yes, gifts to many players over the years, some publicly, most privately. Alex earned this moment not because of her ranking, but because of her heart. That's all that matters to me." For some, the statement closed the conversation. For others, it only confirmed what they already believed about the inequalities embedded in elite sport. Months have passed since that night in Turin. The controversy has retreated from the headlines, but its impact endures. 3 months after the ATP finals, Alexandra Eala won her first WTA title. In every interview since, she still wears the watch. She still references that evening as a turning point. Not the gift itself, but the recognition behind it, the confirmation that someone she deeply admired had been watching and believed in what he saw. But the bigger story is what the controversy uncovered. It forced the tennis world into an uncomfortable but necessary confrontation with truths that the sport tends to ignore. That the lower-tier professional circuit is extraordinarily brutal, that hundreds of talented players grind through obscurity without financial security or institutional support, and that recognition has historically been reserved for those who have already broken through. leaving the fighters in the middle, the ones who need it most, largely invisible. Federer's gesture, intentional or not, became a mirror held up to the sport, a reminder that belief matters, that a single moment of genuine recognition can change the trajectory of a career and a life. But also a reminder that the system routinely fails to provide those moments to the vast majority of players who deserve them just as much. Eala has used whatever platform the moment gave her with purpose and grace. She has advocated openly for better support structures for lower-ranked players, spoken candidly about mental health and financial pressure on tour, and become a voice for the athletes whose struggles rarely make the headlines. And the Rolex Daytona still sits on her wrist, a reminder of a quiet conversation in a Wimbledon locker room, a symbol of resilience, and a message engraved in gold for anyone who has ever felt invisible while fighting with everything they have. To those who fight beyond the baseline, was this simply a generous gesture from a legend to a rising star? Or a moment that inadvertently exposed the deep inequalities living at the heart of professional tennis? Perhaps it was both. And perhaps that is exactly what makes it so enduring, because in a sport obsessed with rankings and trophies and the clean narrative of winners, Roger Federer chose to celebrate something the scoreboard cannot measure: the fight, the heart, the refusal to quit when quitting would have been so much easier.